I never thought my life would change because of a cardboard box. It was Thursday, late afternoon, and I was exhausted. The law firm where I work as a paralegal had drained every last drop of energy from me that day. 3 backlogged cases, an irritated partner, and a coffee that had gone cold on my desk while I typed out endless reports. By the time I finally made it back to my apartment in Brooklyn, all I wanted was to kick off the heels that were killing me and collapse on the sofa with a glass of cheap wine. But there at my apartment door was a box. It wasn't unusual. I ordered things online far too often for my paralegal's salary. Books, mostly. Sometimes clothes I didn't need, but that promised to make me feel better about myself. I picked up the box without much thought. It was heavy, bigger than I expected, and there was no visible return address on top. Probably those books I ordered last week, I muttered to myself, nudging the door open with my shoulder and letting the box thud onto the kitchen counter. My apartment was small, but it was mine. A 3rd-floor studio in an old building with walls thin enough that I could hear the elderly couple next door arguing over the morning paper every morning, but it had a large window overlooking the street that let in the late afternoon light, and that was enough for me. I opened the fridge, grabbed the already open bottle of wine, and poured myself a generous glass. Only then, as I took the first sip, did I turn back to the box. Something wasn't right. The address on the label, it wasn't mine. I mean, it was my building, but the apartment number was wrong. 3C, not 3A, the apartment next door, the one that had been vacant for months. I frowned and moved closer. The box was sealed with industrial packing tape, the kind you can't just rip open with your hands, and it was heavy, far too heavy for books. Damn it, I muttered. I'd have to haul it down to the super and sort it out. But it was late, I was tired, and frankly, it wasn't my fault the delivery guy couldn't read. I grabbed a kitchen knife and sliced through the tape just to take a peek. Maybe it belonged to someone moving into 3C. Or maybe it was something valuable I should look after carefully. I opened the box and my heart stopped. It wasn't books, it wasn't clothes, it was 5 square packages, wrapped in black plastic, arranged with military precision. And even without unwrapping them, even without knowing for sure, something in the back of my mind screamed that this was illegal. I slammed the lid shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. For a second, I considered just leaving the box in the hallway and pretending none of this had happened. But what if someone saw me? What if whoever owned it blamed me? Easy, Isabella, calm down, I told myself, taking a deep breath. You just need to return it. Leave it at 3C's door and walk away. Not your problem. I picked up the box again, now painfully aware of its weight, and stepped out into the hall. The building was silent. The dim lights flickered intermittently, just like they always did. I walked to the door of 3C and knocked lightly, more out of protocol than any real expectation of an answer. The apartment had been empty for so long I sometimes forgot it existed. Nothing. I set the box down on the floor in front of the door and was about to turn back when I heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. Footsteps, firm, heavy, deliberate. I turned and my stomach twisted into a knot. 3 men were walking toward me. They weren't delivery guys, they weren't neighbors. They wore dark, perfectly tailored suits, and there was something in the way they moved, calculated, intimidating, that made me instinctively back away. The man in the middle was different from the other 2, taller, more imposing. Even in the dim hallway light, I could feel the authority radiating from him. Dark hair slicked back, a sharp jawline, and eyes. My God, those eyes. They were dark, intense, and they were locked on me with a severity that stole the air from my lungs. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze dropping to the box on the floor, then back to me. No one spoke for a long moment. The silence was thick, charged with something I couldn't name, fear maybe, or something more dangerous. You opened it, he said finally. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, delivered in a low, controlled voice that carried a threatening weight beneath it. I thought it was mine, I stammered, my voice weaker than I wanted. The delivery guy left it at the wrong door. You opened it, he repeated, taking a step forward. The other 2 men stayed put, but their eyes never left me. You saw what was inside. My heart was beating so hard I was sure they could hear it. I didn't see anything. I saw, but I don't know what it is. I just wanted to return it. He moved closer, and I instinctively took a step back, my shoulders hitting the cool wall of the hallway. He was even more impressive up close. The way his eyes studied me, as if he could see through every lie, every thought, every frantic beat of my heart. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice still low, but now there was something else in it. Curiosity, perhaps. "Isabella," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Isabella Moretti." He tilted his head slightly, as if committing it to memory. "Isabella Moretti," he repeated, and the way my name sounded on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't entirely from fear, it was something different, something unsettling. "You live here?" he asked, gesturing vaguely toward my door, 3A. I nodded, unable to form words. He looked at the box again, then back at me. For a moment I thought he was going to drag me into the empty apartment and do whatever people like him did to inconvenient witnesses. But instead, he took a step back. "Marcos, take this," he ordered one of the men behind him, who immediately collected the box and disappeared down the hall. The man with the dark eyes continued to stare at me. There was something in that gaze, a mix of assessment, interest, and something deeper I couldn't decipher. "You didn't see anything," he said, and this time it wasn't a question or a statement, it was a command. "Understand?" "Yes," I answered quickly, my voice trembling. "I didn't see anything." He nodded slowly but didn't move. Instead, he kept studying me with that intensity that made my stomach churn. "Isabella Moretti," he said again, as if testing the name on his tongue. "Are you afraid of me?" The question caught me off guard. Yes, I was afraid, but there was something else too, something that made me unable to look away, even when every instinct screamed at me to run. "Should I be?" I murmured before I could stop myself. His lips curved slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. It was more intrigued. "Yes," he said simply, "you should." And with that, he turned and walked away, the third man following him without a word. I stood there, leaning against the hallway wall, my heart still racing, my legs trembling. It took several minutes before I could finally move, stumbling back into my apartment and slamming the door, locking every bolt. I leaned against the wood, breathing heavily. What just happened? And why, despite the fear still coursing through my veins, couldn't I stop thinking about his dark eyes, about the way he said my name, about the feeling of being under that intense gaze that felt like it could burn right through me? I threw back the rest of my wine in one go, trying to steady my nerves, but even after a long shower and an attempt to distract myself with a book, I couldn't get the encounter out of my head, his eyes, his voice, the way he'd made me feel simultaneously terrified and alive. I fell asleep late that night, and when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of dark gazes and dangerous promises whispered in the shadows. On Friday morning, I woke up feeling like it had all been a disturbing dream, but when I looked at my apartment door, with its 3 deadbolts thrown, something I never do, reality hit me like a punch to the gut. It really happened. I made my coffee with hands that were still trembling slightly, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. He told me to forget. I would forget. Simple as that. I would never see that man again, and my life would go back to normal. But as the days went by, I discovered that forgetting was impossible. At the office, I'd find my mind drifting, staring into space, while my boss, Mr. Henderson, listed procedures I needed to file. In the evenings, every noise in the hallway made me jump. Every shadow passing my window made me tense up. And worse, much worse, was the way I couldn't stop thinking about him. About the dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. The low voice that made my name sound like both a promise and a threat. The way my body had reacted to his presence, even as my mind screamed danger. "You okay, Bella?" Sarah, my only friend at the firm, asked during our lunch break on Monday. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, pushing the salad around my plate without really eating. She narrowed her eyes, clearly not buying it, but she didn't push. That was Sarah. She respected boundaries, even when she knew I was hiding something. It was on Tuesday that things changed. I was heading home from work, carrying a bag of groceries, when I saw him. He was standing in front of my building, leaning against a black car that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. He was wearing a flawless gray suit, the sleeves of his shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms and a tattoo that snaked up his right arm. My heart instantly took off at a gallop. He saw me at the same moment. His eyes locked on mine, and that familiar intensity made my stomach clench. This time, though, something was different. It wasn't pure menace, it was interest. I thought about turning and running, but my feet seemed glued to the pavement. He pushed himself off the car and walked toward me with that unsettling confidence. Every step was measured, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "Isabella," he said, stopping a few feet away. That voice again, making my name sound like something intimate. "What do you want?" I managed to say, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. He tilted his head, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "To talk." "I have nothing to talk to you about." "I think you do," he said, taking another step forward. He was close enough now for me to catch his scent. Woody, masculine, intoxicating. "You owe me that." "I don't owe you anything," I retorted, but my voice wavered at the end. He studied my face for a long moment, those dark eyes searching every expression, every micro-reaction. "Are you afraid of me?" The same question as before, but this time my answer was different. "No," I said, surprising myself with the truth. "Not like I should be." He smiled then, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it completely transformed his face. For an instant, he didn't look dangerous. He looked human. "Smart," he murmured. "You have good instincts." "What do you want from me?" I repeated, this time with less confrontation and more genuine curiosity. "Dinner," he said simply. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. I blinked, processing. "Dinner?" "You intrigue me, Isabella Moretti," he said, and there was a strange sincerity in his voice. "And I'm not a man who ignores his curiosity." "I don't even know your name," I argued, trying to find any reason to refuse that wasn't based on sheer panic. "Dominic," he said, extending his hand. "Dominic Caruso." I looked at his hand, large, strong, with faint scars across the knuckles that told stories I probably didn't want to know. But still, I found my own hand moving, accepting his grip. The touch was electric. His fingers wrapped around mine with a firmness that was both gentle and possessive. He held on for a second longer than necessary, and when he finally let go, I felt the absence of his warmth immediately. "So, Isabella," he said, taking half a step back. 8 o'clock. I'll send a car." I didn't say I would, I protested, but the resolve in my voice was fading fast. He gave me that small smile again. "But you will." And before I could answer, he turned and walked back to the car. The driver opened the rear door, and Dominic slipped inside with a natural grace. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving me standing there on the sidewalk, my grocery bag still in hand, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. I should have been terrified. I should have been calling the police, changing apartments, doing something, anything, to get away from this man and the obvious danger he represented. But instead, at 8 o'clock that night, I was putting on my best black dress, simple, elegant, the only one I owned that didn't look too cheap, and heading downstairs as a black town car pulled up to my building. The driver, a middle-aged man with a neutral expression, opened the door for me. I got in, feeling simultaneously foolish and bold. The restaurant was in Manhattan, in a part of the city I usually couldn't even afford to walk through. The kind of place that required reservations months in advance and where an appetizer cost more than my rent. Dominic was already there, seated at a private table in the back, sectioned off from the rest of the dining room by heavy velvet curtains. He stood when he saw me, and for the first time, I could truly look at him without the initial fear clouding my vision. He was devastatingly handsome, not in a conventional magazine model way, but in a more dangerous one. There were hard edges to his face, a toughness that spoke of experiences I couldn't imagine. But his eyes, those dark eyes that had haunted me for days, held a depth that made me want to know every secret hidden inside them. "You came," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "I'm still deciding if it was a good idea," I replied, accepting the chair he pulled out for me. He sat across from me, his eyes never leaving mine. Dinner was surreal. We talked about everything and nothing at once. He asked me questions about my life, my job, my family, just my mother, who lived in California and with whom I rarely spoke, my dreams, which suddenly seemed far too small compared to his world. And slowly he began to open up too. Not about the obvious, his occupation, but about smaller things. His childhood in New Jersey, his mother who passed away when he was young, his love for classical music that seemed so incongruous with the rest of him. "Why me?" I finally asked, after the second glass of wine had given me enough courage. "Why bring me here? Why not just leave me alone?" He was silent for a moment, studying his glass of whiskey. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more intimate. "Because when I looked at you in that hallway," he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that stole my breath, "you didn't run. You were scared, yes, but you were also curious, brave. And it's been a long time since someone looked at me and saw something other than what I represent." My heart clenched. There was a vulnerability in his words I hadn't expected. A hint that behind the dangerous facade was a man who was just as lonely as I was. "And does it matter," I murmured, "what I see when I look at you?" "More than it should," he admitted, reaching his hand across the table. His fingers brushed against mine, a light touch that was heavy with promise. I should have pulled away. I should have ended this madness before it truly began. But instead, I turned my hand over and laced my fingers with his. It was in that moment, in that simple but profoundly intimate touch, that I knew I had crossed an invisible line, that my life would never be the same again. And the scariest part? I didn't want to go back. The weeks that followed were like living in two parallel worlds. By day, I was Isabella Moretti, ordinary paralegal, typing up memos and organizing files under the fluorescent lights of a small Manhattan law firm. I drank instant coffee, complained about the subway with Sarah, and pretended my life was perfectly normal. But at night, I was someone else. Dominic didn't appear every day. Sometimes a full week would go by with no word from him, and I would try to convince myself it was for the best. That the distance was reality setting back in, saving me from something dangerous. But then he would show up, always unexpectedly, always intense, and all my resolutions to stay away would crumble like sandcastles. He took me to places I had never imagined. Exclusive restaurants where they served dishes I could barely pronounce. Private art galleries opened just for us after midnight. Once even a private rooftop terrace atop a skyscraper, where we drank champagne and watched the city sprawl endlessly below. "You don't ask me about what I do," he remarked that night on the terrace, his voice cutting through the comfortable silence between us. I was leaning against the balustrade, the cool night wind tossing my hair. I turned to face him. "I know what you do," I answered quietly. "Enough, anyway." He moved closer, stopping so near I could feel the heat from his body. "And that doesn't scare you?" "Should it?" I asked, echoing our first conversations. A smile touched his lips, that rare smile that made my stomach flip. "Yes, very much." "Maybe I like danger," I murmured, surprising myself with the boldness. His eyes darkened, and something shifted in the air between us. He raised a hand, his fingers tracing my cheek with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his gaze. "You're playing with fire, Isabella," he whispered, his face moving closer to mine. "Maybe I want to get burned," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. He kissed me then, and the entire world fell away. It wasn't a gentle or hesitant kiss. It was consuming, possessive, filled with all the pent-up desire that had been building between us for weeks. His hands pulled me closer, and I clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was spinning out of control. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he murmured, his voice raw. "Then show me," I challenged, my heart hammering wildly. He opened his eyes, and what I saw there made me tremble. Desire, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked like fear mixed with an unexpected tenderness. "I don't want to hurt you, Had," he said, his voice laced with a brutal honesty. "Then don't," I replied, kissing him again. But the universe had other plans. It started to change the following week. Dominic grew more distant, more tense. When we did see each other, there was a worry in his eyes that he tried, and failed, to completely hide. "What's going on?" I asked one night as we had dinner at his apartment, a lavish penthouse in Tribeca, overlooking the Hudson River. The place was impeccable, modern, but strangely empty of anything personal, as if he didn't truly live there, just existed. "Nothing you need to worry about," he answered, but he didn't meet my eyes. "Dominic," I said firmly, placing my hand over his, "don't treat me like I'm too fragile for the truth." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes frightened me. It wasn't fear. Men like Dominic didn't feel fear. It was concern, for me. "There are tensions," he finally admitted. "With another family. They're pushing boundaries, wanting things I can't give." "And that's dangerous?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It's always dangerous," he said, his hand tightening on mine. "But this time it's different. They know about you." My blood ran cold. "How?" "Someone saw you with me, took pictures, and now—" He hesitated, as if the next words were physically painful. "Now they think they can use you against me." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I should have felt panic, pure terror, but all I felt was a strange calm, as if part of me had known this moment was coming. "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. He stood up, running a hand through his hair in a frustrated gesture. "It means you need to get away from me, now, before it's too late." "And if I don't want to?" I argued, getting to my feet as well. "This isn't about what you want," he said, his voice hardening. "This is about keeping you alive." "Then protect me," I said, stepping toward him. "You say you're powerful, that you control things. So protect me and stop trying to push me away." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in, my voice rising. "You're scared. Not for you, but for me. And you think pushing me away is the solution, but what if it's not? What if walking away now just makes me more vulnerable?" He was silent, his jaw tight. "They already know about me, Dominic," I continued, my voice softening. "The damage is done, so stop trying to shove me out the door and let me stay. Let me make this choice." He looked at me for a long moment, a visible battle waging in his eyes. Finally, he closed the distance between us, his hands cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted the tension in his body. "You're crazy for wanting this," he murmured. "Maybe," I admitted, covering his hands with mine. "But I'm crazy about you too, so let's face this together." He kissed me then, deeply, desperately, as if trying to memorize the very feel of me. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'll have to put security on you," he said. "Someone will always be watching you, following you. It's going to be invasive. I can handle it. And you can't tell anyone. No one can know the details about us, understand?" "I understand." He took a deep breath. "And if things get bad, really bad, you do what I tell you, no questions asked. Your life could depend on it." The gravity in his voice made me swallow hard, but I nodded. "I promise." In the days that followed, I learned what it meant to live under constant surveillance. There was always a black car trailing me to work. A man in a discreet suit was always nearby when I went out for lunch. It was unnerving, but there was also something comforting in knowing I wasn't alone. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "Okay, you have to tell me what's going on," she said at lunch, her eyes fixed on the man who was clearly watching us from a nearby table. "It's complicated," I answered vaguely. "Complicated like I'm dating someone, or complicated like I need a lawyer?" "Both?" I tried to joke, but she didn't smile. "Bella, you're scaring me. You've got guys following you, you're distracted all the time, and whenever your phone rings, you jump like you're expecting bad news." She wasn't wrong. Dominic called me several times a day now, always checking where I was, if I was safe. It was obsessive, but I understood. He was terrified something would happen to me. "I met someone," I finally admitted. "Someone complicated, but I'm okay, Sarah, I promise." She studied my face for a long moment. "Are you happy?" The question took me by surprise. Was I happy? In the midst of all this danger, all the uncertainty, all the madness of the situation, yes, I am, I replied. And it was the truth. She sighed. "Then I trust you, but if you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Got it?" "Got it." But as the days turned into weeks, the tension kept building. Dominic grew more withdrawn, his visits shorter. When we were together, he was always on edge, always looking over his shoulder. They're closing in, he told me one night in his apartment. He was standing by the window, staring out at the city, as if expecting to see enemies approaching at any moment. How do you know? I just do, he said, his voice strained. There have been incidents, small things for now, but it's an escalation. They're testing, seeing how far they can push before I push back. And will you? I asked quietly. He turned to me, and the look on his face made me swallow hard. It wasn't anger exactly, it was something colder, more calculated. When I push back, he said, his voice low and dangerous, it will be decisive. I went to him, placing my hands on his chest. Beneath the expensive shirt, I could feel his heart beating just as fast as mine. I trust you, I said softly. He closed his eyes, his hands covering mine. You shouldn't. But I do. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his face buried in my hair. Promise me something, he murmured against my hair. What? Promise me that if I tell you to run, you run. You don't look back. You don't ask questions. You just go. My heart clenched. Dominic, promise me, he insisted, pulling back to look me in the eye. I promise, I said finally, even as every fiber of my being rejected the thought of leaving him behind. He kissed me then, deeply, desperately, as if this might be the last kiss we would ever share. And maybe, somehow, he knew. Maybe he could already feel the storm rolling in, the storm that would tear everything apart. The day began like any other. It was Saturday, and for the first time in weeks, Dominic had managed to clear his entire schedule. No urgent meetings, no constant phone calls, no simmering tension that had become a fixture in our relationship. He took me out of the city to a property I didn't know he owned, a secluded house in Westchester surrounded by trees and miles from anything. It was beautiful in an understated way, modern but warm, with massive windows that let in the autumn light. I come here when I need to think, he told me as we walked inside, when the world gets too loud. The interior was surprisingly personal compared to his sterile Manhattan penthouse. There were books on the shelves, framed photographs of places he'd visited, a guitar leaning in one corner, pieces of the real Dominic, hidden away from the world. It's beautiful, I said, taking it all in. He pulled me into his arms, resting his chin on the top of my head. I've wanted to bring you here for weeks, but it wasn't safe. Is it now? Nobody knows about this place, he said. It's mine, only mine, and now ours. My heart warmed at his words, the idea of having something that was just ours, away from the danger and complications of his life, was almost too perfect to be real. We spent the afternoon lazily. We cooked together, or tried to, which resulted in more stolen kisses than actual food being made. We drank wine as we watched the sun begin to set through the enormous windows. He played a few songs on the guitar, his surprisingly beautiful, raspy voice singing softly. For the first time, since I'd met him, Dominic seemed at peace. And so was I. Thank you, I said softly as we lay on the sofa, my body curled against his. For what? He asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm. For showing me this place. For letting me see you, the real you. He was silent for a moment, then shifted to face me. There was something vulnerable in his eyes, something I rarely saw. You make me want to be a better man, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. When I'm with you, I can imagine a different life, one where I don't always have to be looking over my shoulder. My heart ached. You can have that life, Dominic. It doesn't have to be this way forever. You don't understand, he said, running his fingers through my hair. This isn't something you just quit. This world, once you're in, it never lets you go. Then I'll be in it with you, I replied simply. Wherever you are is where I want to be. He kissed me then deeply, and I felt every emotion he was trying to communicate. Desire, yes, but also gratitude, fear, and something deeper that neither of us was ready to name. The sun had set completely when his phone rang. He hesitated, clearly not wanting to break the moment, but then he glanced at the screen and his entire expression shifted. The peace on his face vanished, replaced by the hard mask I knew so well. I have to take this, he said, already getting up. Dominic, stay here, he ordered, his voice shifting to that tone of command that allowed no argument. Don't leave this room. He walked out, and I could hear him speaking in low, rapid Italian in the hallway. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone: anger, tension, danger. When he returned minutes later, he was visibly changed. His jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists. "We have to go," he said abruptly. "Now." "What happened?" "Isabella, don't argue with me. We have to go. Now." The panic in his voice, something I had never heard before, had me on my feet instantly. But before we could take more than 2 steps, every light in the house went out. We were plunged into total darkness. "Don't move," Dominic whispered, his voice taut. I could hear him moving quickly, probably grabbing something, a gun, I realized with a chill. "Dominic, what?" "Quiet," he commanded, his voice barely audible. I stood frozen, my heart beating so loudly I was sure anyone could hear it. In the silence, I started to pick up other sounds. Footsteps outside. More than one person, a lot of people. "They found it," Dominic murmured, more to himself than to me. "How did they find it?" Before I could answer, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. A window in the kitchen. "Come with me," Dominic whispered urgently, grabbing my hand. "And don't make a sound." He led me through the darkness with a certainty that spoke to an intimate knowledge of the house. We entered what felt like a study at the back of the hall. Dominic quietly shut the door behind us and pulled me down behind his desk. "There's a panel," he whispered rapidly in my ear, "behind the bookshelf. If something happens to me, you get in there and you wait. There's a phone. You call the number in its memory. Marco will come for you." "Dominic, no. You promised," he said firmly, his hands gripping my shoulders. "You promised you'd do what I said." Tears stung my eyes. "Don't leave me." He kissed me quickly, desperately. "I love you, Isabella. Remember that, no matter what happens." Before I could answer, before I could even process what he'd just said, the office door burst open. 3 men entered, dark silhouettes against the faint light from the hall. Dominic was instantly in front of me, his gun raised. "Not another step," he commanded, his voice like ice. "Caruso," a voice sneered, and even in the dark, I could feel the cruelty in it. "You thought you could defy us without consequences?" "You trespassed on my property," Dominic replied calmly, though I could feel the tension in every muscle of his body. "That's a death sentence for you." The man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're outnumbered. There are a dozen of us here. And you have a witness to protect." My blood ran cold. A witness. That's how they saw me. "She's not a part of this," Dominic said, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "Let her go." "Oh, but she is a part of it now," the man replied. "The great Dominic Caruso's girlfriend. Did you really think you could keep her hidden? That we wouldn't find your weakness?" "Last chance," Dominic said, his finger moving on the trigger. "Get out, now." "Or what, you'll shoot all of us? Even if you manage it, more will come. And she—" The voice paused, and I could feel the malicious grin in it. "She will pay for every one of us that falls." It all happened in seconds. Dominic fired first, hitting one of the men who dropped with a heavy thud. But that only unleashed the chaos. The other 2 men rushed him, and more poured in through the door. The office erupted in a blur of motion and violence. Dominic was incredible, efficient, precise, lethal, but there were too many of them. Far too many. I huddled behind the desk, trying to make myself invisible, my body trembling uncontrollably. The sounds of fists connecting, of bodies slamming into furniture, of pained grunts filled the air. "Isabella, run!" Dominic yelled, and when I looked, he was on the ground, 3 men trying to hold him down, but his eyes were locked on me, wild and desperate. "Run!" Before I could move, brutal hands grabbed me from behind, yanking me to my feet. I screamed, struggled, but it was useless. "We got her!" a voice announced triumphantly. The effect on Dominic was instantaneous. He fought like a cornered animal, a raw and desperate force that momentarily threw off his attackers. He managed to get to his feet, to break free, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Let her go," he roared, his gun aimed again. But then I felt something cold and hard press against my temple. Another gun.